Former NATO Secretary General makes a suggestion. Not a good suggestion, but a suggestion. The former Secretary General of NATO, Anders Fogh Rasmussen, pitched an idea that he believes will de-escalate the war between Ukraine and Russia. The proposal is for Ukraine to be partially accepted into NATO, and though this would not be a full acceptance into NATO, it would strengthen Ukraine's position at the bargaining table. The proposal put forth by Rasmussen is a serious proposal and worth considering, but does not seem like one that will get universal acceptance and would be expected to outrage Russia. The positive side of the proposal is that European countries are putting forth ideas to end the war, and that is something that should be encouraged. Rasmussen's proposal is that Ukraine should be partially accepted into NATO next year when NATO leaders meet for the 75th anniversary of its founding. Partially accepted means that any Ukrainian territory that was seized by the Russians, including 2014 territory, will be outside the scope for an Article 5 NATO response, but every other part of Ukraine would be available to be defended by NATO forces. This would be the first partial acceptance and accepting of a member while they are already at war. The proposal also has a secondary purpose meant to tell Russia that it cannot dictate who NATO offers membership. This means that Ukraine would be able to free up troops and redirect them to the fighting front as NATO takes over parts of Ukraine's border that are not experiencing fighting. NATO would establish a no-fly zone over Ukraine, which would include missile attacks. NATO would seal out the battlefield and keep the war from escalating to other parts of the Ukraine. An issue with this approach, it will allow the Ukraine to advance into Russian-held Ukraine territory, but Russia will not be allowed to advance into Ukraine territory because it would generate an Article 5 response. Ukraine attacks into Russia were not addressed either. It seems like this asymmetric proposal that allows Ukraine to advance and attack Russia with no reciprocal response allowed by Russia would be ignored or rejected by Russia. This would set up a partial acceptance into NATO, and the rules established for Ukraine membership puts conditions on how Russia conducts its war, but sets no conditions on Ukraine. It seems doubtful that Russia would accept this proposal, but would not be able to stop it unless it expanded the war or would ignore NATO rules and dare NATO to react to a Russian incursion into Ukraine territory. Partial membership puts the ball into Russia's court. The proposal is also hypocritical, and just as NATO does not want Russia to have a say on how the alliance operates, they are imposing a solution that reduces Russia's options to operate, unless it chooses to escalate. Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev, a Putin ally, responded to the proposal rather mockingly. He stated that such an offer is an acknowledgement the Donbass and the Crimea are not part of Ukraine, and even that Ukraine is not even a country, but a territory artificially put together. This is a statement that's been repeated by Putin and his allies before. One thing that was not said is that this would escalate the war. It appears that, at least at this early stage, they view this as a land for peace proposal, or they assess the situation in NATO that Turkey or Hungary will not accept Ukraine membership. All NATO countries must be unanimous in agreement before a country be accepted as a NATO member. The fact that Russia did not respond harshly is a sign that they may be willing to have an off-ramp to war, especially considering that Ukraine NATO membership threat was one of the reasons that Russians invaded in the first place. The caution is that Medvedev holds no official capacity in the Russian government. He is considered a Putin hardliner, so him not outright rejecting it is a sign that the hardliner's potential position. This proposal, along with the proposal to allow Ukraine to join the European Union, are offers that allow Ukraine to get both economic and military stability that failed under the Budapest Memorandum. The hard part for Ukraine is to accept as the loss of territory to the Russians, and this might be too far for them to accept. The point is not that this proposal is full of risk, and Rasmussen, like Medvedev, holds no official capacity. It is the fact that after 20 months of war, some real concrete proposals are being proposed over the last week to find a way out of the war in Ukraine. So these proposals and their discussions should continue to come forward.